Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Apologies in advance, colleagues. I don't usually like talking this much, so sorry. Today I rise in unsurprising opposition to House Bill 5016, which is our agency budget. I want to begin by saying every single department makes this work possible and does amazing work for us. Thank you. My dissent on this bill today is not a reflection of their critical work. Rather, I am standing today in defense of that work. Keen-eyed legislators may notice that this bill came to us out of the Capital Construction Subcommittee of Ways and Means, but it's not a major capital project, so what's going on? For now, I sit on the General Government Subcommittee of Ways and Means, and that's the usual subcommittee this budget comes through. We had 2 informational meetings and a public hearing about this bill, as well as multiple meetings where the Assembly budget was discussed. The hot topic of all these discussions was around including full-time, year-round funding for our second legislative assistants. The budget before us today does not include that funding. In fact, an amendment for that funding was denied consideration by our subcommittee. Our committee was actually denied consideration of the entire budget, not just that amendment. Prior to this session, our staff, the first unionized legislative staff in the country, was in bargaining. As a staunch labor advocate, it was unusual for me to be on the side of management. But as management, myself and some of my colleagues requested updates on the bargaining being done in our name. Eventually, we got that update, and it included the discussion about funding for a year-round second staffer. I know many members in this chamber supported proposals for a second full-time LA. But we were told that adding additional year-round staff could not be a subject of bargaining because it would impact the budget, which requires approval from the Legislative Assembly. A bipartisan bicameral sign-on letter that requested funding for LA2 circulated in December and was sent to leadership of both chambers and the Ways and Means co-chairs. In addition to this and the advocacy of staff, numerous legislators from across the aisle and chambers advocated for this funding in committee hearings over the last couple months. We're now less than a week away from constitutional sine die, but still in session. We were told we could make improvements to staffing levels in session, and we've been stonewalled with the measure taken out of the hands of its original committee. Members of this body have overwhelmingly indicated that the workload is too high for just our chiefs of staff to handle as a solo staffer, especially as we're considered a citizen legislature. Many of us have to maintain day jobs. As our good Speaker Pro Tem has mentioned since our public hearing in general government, we had over 10% of our colleagues appear in support of this funding request. 12 legislators testified from both chambers and both parties at an 8 a.m. committee meeting, not to mention the support of every single one of the 8 members of our subcommittee who spoke in support of this change. And while I appreciate the effort to find a solution, which today takes the form of a budget note to research the workload in other states and how they deal with it, that doesn't solve the problem that we as members brought to our presiding officers. Whether or not there are similar workloads in other states and how they address that is immaterial to the issues we face here in this legislature. It might be interesting information, and I'll bet there are some innovative solutions out there, but there are also legislative bodies in this country that don't have any staff at all. Will this research yield the answer that we're lucky to have staff in the first place? When we, as independently elected officials, are denied the tools to perform the functions of our office at the level of need required by our constituents, it denies our constituents the representation and access to essential constituent services that they are entitled to and deserve. In our subcommittee, we often discuss the importance of redundancy among staffers in our vital state agencies. So why do we expect a single staffer to run our offices during the interim? Why are we hindering our ability to maintain standards if our chief of staff needs to take family leave, experiences an emergency, or simply needs time to deal with the illnesses and life situations that arise for all of us on the basis of being a human being? The structure of our legislative staffing promotes high turnover and staff burnout. Our legislative session timeline is too short for staff to take time off without it negatively impacting their office, their work, and their legislator, but they also can't take time in the interim without the office going totally unstaffed in their absence. This is a highly specialized field of work that requires niche skills and dedication, and every session, we lose amazing staff with a wealth of knowledge because of the seasonal and unstable nature of their roles. We must do better. Finally, colleagues, I want to discuss something I've brought up several times in multiple contexts this year: process, and what isn't working in that process. This budget should have come out of our subcommittee. But what our subcommittee wanted, after hearing overwhelming testimony in favor, was not honored. As I was considering voting no on a budget that did not include year-round LA2 funding, I had to accept that I could be temporarily replaced in order to get the needed votes, or perhaps replaced on the committee altogether. This is not a unique situation, as we saw last week when in the Transportation Committee, a member who would not vote for the bill was discharged from his committee assignment. Today, as I speak on this bill, I have also had to accept that I may lose a committee assignment that I value. But that's what I'm here for, to speak up against the status quo regardless of personal cost to myself. I know and appreciate that many of you are not in the position to do the same. As I checked in with several of my colleagues about this budget, colleagues who'd been staunch advocates for year-round LA2 funding, it seemed to me that people felt intimidated. Members expressed concerns to me about their gavels, their bills, and their funding requests. When a majority is overruled by a few people, that is not what is defined as a democratic process. For that reason, I'm opposed to this budget so long as it doesn't include the year-round LA2 funding we were told could be allocated via this process. Thank you.